I'm going to turn this over to Chris Schwartz, he's with Americans for Democratic Action.
Let me see. A couple more things to add to the prescription drug issue. Just an example of how devastating this is for global AIDS initiatives. In the year 2000, it cost around $10,000 a year just to treat one patient, but then we were able to bring that cost down to just $140 a year because of access to these generic medicines. So adding that 20-year extension on these patents is just going to be devastating, potentially millions of people around the world. And the other thing that's really devastating is that if we get this into the Trans-Pacific Partnership, it's going to kind of become the new norm for future trade negotiations, as with anything else that's in this, but especially for the prescription issue. As far as domestic prescriptions, one thing that's really going to impact seniors, in addition to not having access to generics earlier than 20 years, when seniors fall into the donut hole, there are certain discounts that they can get on those drugs that they're paying out of pocket for. Those discounts could go away under the Trans-Pacific Partnership because of it being a quote-unquote unfair impediment to the pharmaceuticals' ability to make that money. Yes?
Jim Hightower has said of this deal, this pact, it has 29 chapters and only 5 are about trade. The rest are about corporate protectionism.
All right, one other box I want to highlight under here, government procurement. It's not very sexy sounding, but it's a really big deal as far as stimulating the economy. So just to give you one example, I'm working on writing a housing initiative for the city of Waterloo, which we would go in, restore old homes and turn them into owner-occupied. It's a big project and it would cost a lot of money that we have to raise. But we want to do that in a way that gets the most bang for the buck for the local economy. So as we're drafting that, I'm including language that says you must go with local contractors, you must buy your supplies locally if you're going to qualify for these down payment incentive programs and for these low interest home improvement loans. Under the TPP, the city of Waterloo could come in and be sued under the World Court by some corporation located in any of those countries that are members of the pact. That would absolutely devastate the city. One other thing I want to highlight locally about this is that it's no longer just about manufacturing jobs, like has been said, right? That it is about all these customer service and high-tech jobs. We just had really devastating layoffs in Waterloo this fall. Aquid Mortgage, which is already an awful company, they were involved with a lot of the subprime mortgage business, but they laid off 300 people in Waterloo just this fall, and those jobs are all going to Korea. Now they did some nominal layoffs at the same time in India just so they could look like they were cutting things off, but it was all horseshit. Like they were cutting these jobs and just booting these people out. So we're in a situation in Waterloo that we're really trying to build this city up. We're working really hard, making great progress in areas, and then we get a blow like this from a big multinational that the city trusted. The city gave them tax incentives to come there in the first place, so they get breaks on their taxes, and this is how they repay them. So we can go on to that. So, like we said, this is being negotiated in secret. The way we know most of the things that we do know about it is actually through WikiLeaks, which gets a lot of bad press all the time, but I'm very, very thankful that they're there because they've proved very crucial to our democracy in more ways than one, but especially on this issue. All the information we have is really coming from WikiLeaks and a couple other leaked sources. Yes?
Under what theory or what legal precedent is the government quoting to say that members of Congress, journalists, and you and I, can't get access?
So they're basically operating in the way that you would operate if the president had fast track authority granted, but they're trying to do that before fast track has actually been granted. So it's to me it's really, really shady grounds that they're operating under.
But you don't know the specific legal precedent or what they're quoting to news organizations or to members of Congress? I mean, actually, what part of the Freedom of Information Act do they feel that they can in fact get around?
Right, I mean, that's a good question. I think it's why it's being done so secretly, just because of how bad the deal is. So they're trying to keep it all secret, but I don't know what the legal precedent is that they're citing. This is how it would operate if they had fast track authority. And so it seems to be how they're operating now. And that if there is, so without fast track authority, this will eventually have to be public and go to the Congress. We'll have to vote openly on it, and we have to debate openly on it. But if the president is given fast track authority, then it can be passed, and all this stuff will remain in secret just as it is now.
And the 600 corporate advisors, is there a list of who is a corporate advisor? Is that open to the public?
That's been leaked. It's
been leaked, but
right.
they've not legitimately given it?
Right.
Wow. And there's no major media organization who's gone in and spent any money to fight this?
Investigative journalism is dead in this country.
Well, you're talking to a journalist or kind of a journalist or an ex-journalist, okay, locally though, okay. Anyway, and I would not disagree with that 100%, it's certainly underfunded.
Right.
Okay, all right, so, but I just listening to this, there's still business desks
Right.
that are being funded.
Right.
Well, I can tell you one corporation that has their foot in the door, and is one of the consultants is, anybody heard of Halliburton? Yeah, they have a place at the table. So here's a partial list of the folks down there. See Halliburton's highlight, of course, GE Oil and Gas is on there, Chevron Corporation, the National Coal Council. So all the people that really have your best interest at heart, that are all the good doers in our community, they're all on the list. It's a real list of champions here.
Koch brothers there somewhere, was
Oh,
there?
yes.
They're on there.
And Chris, if it doesn't break our internets, we'll post the whole list on our website
Awesome.
too. Unless there's some virus.
So again, why TPP is so secret, there's 134 members of the U.S. House of Representatives have signed a letter trying to, get more information on this, and they're still just being shut out of it. And the only reason they do bad trade deals in secret is because they're bad. So it's fast track authority, just to go back to that and explain to it a little bit more on what that is. It first came into play in 1974 under the Nixon administration, and it's been used on 5 trade agreements since then. Of course, there's been more than 5 trade agreements since 1974, but all the worst ones were negotiated with fast track authority, including NAFTA, and most recently including CAFTA. Fast track authority ran out in 2007. While we were still in the Bush administration, he was trying to get reauthorized. Luckily, Congress did not reauthorize it for him that time. And so now there's no fast track authority for the current president, which is why he's trying to seek that and why we have to stop it. But next slide. So, like we said, the TPP is going to exacerbate our democracy crisis. The TPP would empower corporations to attack governments before private tribunals, demanding our tax dollars to compensate loss of expected future profits. Now that's important. That's an important line there. Expected future profits. So not only could the city of Waterloo be sued because they wanted you to buy your paint locally for the cost of what that paint was, they could be sued for whatever number this outside corporation comes up with, saying that this was what our future profits were going to be because of this business transaction you didn't allow us to fairly compete in. So, the next slide. So, and as we've said over and over, this is going to really exacerbate our economic crisis. We're going to lose more and more call center jobs. We're going to lose the few manufacturing jobs that we have left here. Even U.S. federal government contracts, which is one of the fastest way the government can stimulate the economy, is through their contracts and how they execute those by using locally sourced goods and using good paying labor. So even those, the US government could be sued by a member country or a corporation in another country for deciding what workers they wanted to use under their own contracts. Of course, we're going to see further erosion of the standard of living. It's no accident that so wages in America really went kind of stagnant starting at the late 70s, really 80s with Ronald Reagan, but then it really got bad in the 90s when national insurance passed, because then we were competing with we had to compete with what they were charging or paying in countries like Mexico. Well, now Mexico has to compete with what they're charging in a place like Vietnam. So the jobs went there, and now they would go from Mexico to Korea, then Korea to Vietnam. So it's just this global race to the bottom, and there's just no way to possibly compete or to get ahead with this. We can go. So, like we said, that it's not just about manufacturing; it's about these service sector jobs as well. So, and that's mostly what the economy is based on now in the United States. It's service sector jobs. It's whether it's working in a call center or working as a software engineer. My father, for example, has been a software engineer since the 70s when the computers took up the whole floor. And he's been with the same company, which has been bought out a number of times, and now it's part of a large, big pharmaceutical company. A couple of years ago, he was given his 3 months notice, saying your job that you've had here for over 40 years is going to be sent over to India. Well, luckily for him, the day before his layoff was supposed to go into effect, they offered him a job in a different department. But most of his coworkers weren't so lucky. So people that had been there for 20, 30, 40 years in the so-called white-collar jobs are even now competing with low-wage labor, with low labor standards all across the world. So it's not just about manufacturing. It's really all jobs across the sector, whether you're someone that went to a community college to get a tech job or have mechanical skills, or if you're someone that went to university and you're an engineer, or pretty much anything except for what really actually requires you to be here in the United States can be outsourced.
That's 535 jobs in Washington.
Right. Right. So, like I said, the problem is just going to become a crisis. 3.4 million U.S. service sector jobs were projected to have been offshored between 2003 going into the future of 2015. The Trans-Pacific Partnership will really just increase this offshoring of service sector jobs. So, like the few jobs that still exist at Auckland and Waterloo, they're not going to be there at all. So the 300 or 400 people that are still there, that's just not going to be there at all. Like the company my dad works for, that's not going to be located in Dubuque, Iowa anymore. It's all going to be gone, and so there's just not going to be anything for you to do after you graduate from high school or your community college or your university. Next one. So I've touched on this a little bit, that Buy American and Buy Jobs. Preferences for Buy American and prevailing wages, renewable, recycled, and other domestic preferences for signatory countries could be challenged. So just another example of this, say the state of Iowa was finally going to work on our bridges and said, we're going to do this in a way that gives a boost to our economy, so we're going to use good paying jobs that pay the prevailing wage. So we have highly qualified construction workers from right here in Iowa, and they're making a good living off of doing this job. A corporation in China, if they signed on to, it said, hey, we wanted to bid on this project, and so we could have China come in and build our bridges with their low labor standards and everything else. So that's really something to think about. It's really a really big threat to our sovereignty. So Vietnam, we touched on Vietnam just a little bit tonight, but Vietnam is really kind of the worst example of all the countries that are included in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. They have suppression of the right to form independent unions.
the law in Vietnam does not allow workers to organize and join independent unions of their choice. That's from the US State Department, so our own government is saying this. Restrictions on strikes, Vietnam Labor Code allows party-controlled unions to strike, but imposes strict and cumbersome conditions that must first be met, which effectively nullify this right. Goods produced by child labor and forced labor, Vietnam is very guilty of using child labor and forced labor in its garment sector. The daily, you can see here the daily minimum wage in these different countries, whereas it's $58 in the United States, down to $8.70 in Malaysia, $4.59 in China, and just $2.23 in Vietnam. So most of these corporations, they're going to bypass Malaysia. They're going to probably, well, for the most part, bypass China. They're going to go to the lowest bang for their dollar if they're at Vietnam. So Vietnam is one of 3 countries found by our Department of Labor to be using child slave labor. An example of what happens in Vietnam is scouts will go into kind of the rural areas of the country, which are very destitute, and they're paying families as little as between $600 and upwards on the high end around $1,000, basically to buy a child as young as the age of 6 to come and work in garment factories in the big cities. And so it's really, I mean, so first of all, you think about you're competing with a $2.33 an hour wage. That's the people that are actually getting paid that wage. You've got forced labor in addition to that, and it's child labor, something that we did away with in our country nearly over 100 years ago. And it's still happening, and we're going to allow this to happen. We're going to allow our goods and products to be made by child labor if we pass the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So here's an example of child. So according to media counts, garment factory owners had traveled to rural districts to hunt. So they're paying, they were paying, I was wrong, I overestimated, so it was between $50 and $100 to send them into the city. And some of the children were reportedly given drugs by the factory owners just to keep them alert and just keep them working. It's just really, really awful conditions that a lot of our products are already made in around the world, but this is just going to exacerbate an already bad situation and just make more and more of our products made by these small little hands. We can go on to the next. So here's an example of a 6-year-old in Chicago. So she's holding a sign that if she were in Vietnam, she would be old enough to work. She would be there in the garment factories working. So broken promises. All these trade agreements have had broken promises. Trade agreements sometimes have labor chapters. Most of them do have labor chapters, but they are never, ever enforced. President Clinton campaigned and said we are going to have strong labor standards. There are going to be labor rights in NAFTA. Bullshit. There might have been in there, but none of them were enforced. Not a single one of them has ever been enforced. In Bahrain, failed to uphold its own weak labor laws, suspended and restricted many of its labor laws. During the Arab Spring, Bahrain's king suspended free speech, right to protest, and others, and forcibly dissolved Bahrain's labor federation. In Colombia, which is the Free Trade of the Americas, FTA, Labor Action Plan, has completely failed. Rampant violence and murder against laborers throughout the country, and evidence of forced, compulsory, and even child labor. In Colombia, some of you might be familiar with what is happening in the Coca-Cola bottling plants. The steel workers did a great campaign a couple years ago, and they brought some of those labor organizers to the United States. I was a student, you and I at the time, we brought some of those there to speak. They were actually hiring the paramilitary groups in Colombia to go and assassinate labor organizers.
Over 150 of them.
Right. And so we brought some of them that fled for their lives to come here and speak. But these are the conditions that we are saying our American workers have to compete against. I mean, this is no way a level playing field at all. So we can go on to the next. So the catch of the day is box raising. Like we like it's been said, there's all sorts of seafood products and other products that our Food and Drug Administration currently turn away and don't allow these companies to even import into the United States anymore because they have such a awful history of standards. Under the Trans-Pacific Partnership, if they're in one of these member countries, we're gonna get sued when we say we don't want your nasty fish, or we don't want your, rotten vegetables that maybe have E. coli and such. Yes.
So does that mean they're reprimanding Title 21?
Excuse me?
Does that mean they're reprimanding Title 21? Title 21 is essentially the USDA creating these food safety systems to prevent these trade issues when it comes to food safety. So if what you're saying is true, then our government is contradicting itself. So they would be
Right.
forced to change it,
Right.
which is, they've already changed it, but for the better with FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act. So
Right, I
you
mean,
would-
the whole trade agreement is full of contradictions to already existing US laws and labor standards and environmental standards. So, yeah, I mean, it would be overriding US, current
But
US
they're not
laws of
gonna
all sorts.
outwardly say,
Right.
to take away those good laws. What they'll say is that this agreement will supersede those laws. So that they can't,
Right.
sue you because you've given them
Right.
the right to ship in this bad stuff. So, because we've given them the right, then, consumers just need to be more cautious. I wouldn't buy it.
The minute they sue us in the world court for future, I mean, if somebody can't send us some rotten products, and because we have a law of food safety in place, all they have to do is sue us in the world court or the UN tribunal for future loss of profits, and, we may not have to bring it in, but we're gonna have to pay to not bring it in then. That's what doesn't make sense about this whole thing.
So, we can create our own power, and we have done it in the past. Successful battles won against corporate power grabs by trade agreements. So in 1999, the WTO agreements were derailed. That was by people power in the streets, as through union activists and environmentalists joining together in a very, very forceful way. The multilateral agreement on investment was also derailed, and the US-Malaysia, US-SAF Customs Union, US-Thailand, US-UAE, and the Egypt FTAs, and many more, have been derailed because of people getting involved and people demanding to know what's in it. So it is possible. So I know we talked about a lot of really dark stuff tonight, but it's not all doom and gloom. That there is possibility and there's growing momentum to stop this. So negotiations are ongoing. The government wanted this to actually be done last December, but because of outcry and because of the leaks that have happened and us finding out the different parts of this, and the fact that the president hasn't been able to get fast-track authority on this, here we are in March now, and there's still not any closer to getting this passed. And that's because of people like you, like actually caring about what's in here. So Congress has yet to vote on fast track, and because of all the organizing that's